Now, one of the most bizarre stories of this or any other week is the allegation that circuited the world before the truth could get its boots on, that Britain's Got Talent has been rigged. Now, let me be absolutely clear. I'm actually a bit of an admirer of Simon Cowell, who's made a silk purse out of the sow's ear of the good old talent competition. I think he's a pretty cool guy. I know that's not everybody's point of view. But when I see him with his eyelid drooping from his Botox that failed, looking at dancing dogs and 90-year-old pensioners, and calling it Britain's Got Talent, well, I really don't know how he can keep a straight face. Maybe it's the money. But I've never believed that his shows are rigged. And yet that's exactly the allegation that has been made on the internet and has gone across the whole world. I've never met Simon in my life, says 12-year-old Ronan, speaking out after Cowell calls in the police. Because that's what Simon did. He phoned the police when this false allegation was made on the internet. Ronan Parks spoke out to deny extraordinary allegations that Britain's Got Talent has been fixed. The talent show has been thrown into chaos over the claims, which are totally denied by Cowell's production company and centre on 12-year-old Ronan, who's the bookies' favourite to win the final tomorrow night. An anonymous internet blog, unsubstantiated but claiming to be written by a Sony BMG executive, alleges that Cowell's company Psycho talent spotted Ronan 2 years ago in direct contravention of show rules and has fixed it for him to win. The 2,500-word assault on Psycho describes its alleged manipulation of not only the show and the contestants but also the viewing public. Last night, appalled Cowell called in Scotland Yard, making an official complaint about the malicious campaign to officers. It's turning into a whodunit of a very considerable proportions. And the Daily Star's TV critic Mike Ward has been good enough at this very late hour to come on and help us try to get to the bottom of it. Mike, thanks very much for joining us.
That's okay. Good evening, George.
Good evening. Now, where might this have come from? Let's rule out the fact that it really was a Sony executive who wrote it. That seems extremely unlikely. But if not them, who?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, the thing with the internet, blogging, social media, etc., it's sort of opened the floodgates for basically any old nutter to have their say in a way that sort of, yes, you know, you take the principles of free speech to a ridiculous extent, and you get to the point where, as you say, before anybody can control it, this stuff is out there, and it puts us in a whole new world, doesn't it? Where, you know, similar to sort of some Twitter allegations recently that, you know, had degrees of accuracy and degrees of vagueness, you basically, you almost have to sort of step back from the whole thing and say we need to sort of have an entirely new approach, both in terms of legislation and in terms of how we interpret this stuff before we move forward, because, you know,
well, in this case,
disinformation is out there.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is, disinformation by people who hate Cowell or hate the show.
Absolutely.
I hate the bloomin' show, I must say, that Britain's Got Talent. But the victim in this case is not actually Cowell or Psycho, but a 12-year-old boy who in immediately the day or 2 days preceding the biggest day of his life, the final, finds himself being accused around the world of being corruptly fixed to win the show.
Well, absolutely, yeah. I mean, obviously, you know, even the mad allegation sort of didn't necessarily imply that, you know, the 12-year-old boy had masterminded the whole thing. But having said that, you're right. He becomes the real victim in all this. I mean, you know, there is an irony, of course, that whenever Simon Cowell's shows are on, one way or another, they make the front pages, whether it's for reasons that he wants to be there or not, which, of course, on one level is great publicity regardless. But, you know, I think it's reasonable to say, unless I'm being very naive, that he didn't want this.
No, I wouldn't have thought so, but I think you're right on every other day. I mean, they do have an ability to keep their shows on the front pages or high up the news agenda,
Yeah.
even without doing anything really.
Yeah, absolutely, and quite right. I mean, it works both ways. That's brutally honest. It's a two-way arrangement because obviously a show that's watched by 13.5 million, whatever it is, viewers in each evening is basically going to be something that people want to read about. So in terms of making your newspapers readable, then putting Britain's Got Talent on the front page makes perfect sense. So that's fine. Nobody's complaining about that. It's a two-way arrangement, and I think Simon Cowell is a very, as you say, a very clever operator. I've got a huge amount of admiration for him, and I even, to a certain degree, will defend the show against sort of
even the dancing dogs.
Yeah, because the thing is, it's I think we have to say it's not a talent show in the straightforward sense, because basically we've got 40 acts come through this week over the course of the 5 live shows. If it was a real talent show, they would be the most 40 talented people in the country or in the auditions or whatever. They're not. He wants to create 5 nights of live TV that has the good, the bad, and the ugly. So by definition, you have to put some bad ones through, so that each show has the people that get booed, the people who get laughed at, the people who get cheered.
But that's a bit of a freak show, isn't it?
It is controlled, and I think even Simon Cowell would have to admit that it's controlled in a way that ultimately is about making good TV, which means, yes, you do have the ridiculous ones, you do have the people that get buzzed off halfway through, but if you just had people who were very good, it would be a completely different type of show. It doesn't mean it would be a bad show, but that's not what he creates. His genius is to create a show that has everything, including the mad stuff, because the mad stuff puts the good stuff into context.
And what's with this droopy left eye? It's got to be a Botox accident.
I couldn't possibly comment. Not having experienced Botox myself, I'm not aware of this. Sometimes you just get, lack of sleep, maybe. Stress.
Now, I know we're digressing slightly, but what happened to Ward Cherrill? I mean, there she goes to a glittering new career in America, gets the sack after 2 shows, but she doesn't get her old gig back. And a couple of people with not an ounce of her charisma or even recognition factor in the country are sitting in her place. She must be pretty sore about all that.
I think she must be pretty sore. It's a very strange sequence of events. The whole American TV works on a totally different level from over here. It's ruthless in a way that we don't even begin to understand. So the sacking of Cheryl, the removing of Cheryl from the X Factor panel over there, there was suggestions initially that was the TV bosses, then it was Simon himself, it was suggested, who was instrumental in the decision. And then, of course, we had the question of whether she was put under pressure to make a decision as to whether she wanted to come back on this one. Again, it's all headlines. It's fantastic.
It's all good copy.
It's all good copy, and it makes us talk about it. But then, a couple of years ago we had the whole thing of Louis Walsh getting sacked from the X Factor panel, or whether Sharon Osbourne was going to be on. We soon forget. This is the one thing we soon forget. We move on very, very quickly, and stuff that we think is terrible, and the show's going to fall apart without Cheryl. 6 months down the line, somebody else has come along and they've done okay, and we've moved on to the next step.
We've got a new national sweetheart. What's going to happen to her though? I mean, how's she going to get by with her L'Oreal adverts? I mean, they'll presumably dry up now that she's not on the TV every Saturday.
I think she's probably got enough money.
Do you think?
Put aside for the moment. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so.
To take a breather.
She's young to retire, definitely.
I like Cheryl.
Me too.
Yeah, I think
too. I'm sorry not to see her on a Saturday. I think she should have got the British job back. I didn't want her to go to America in the first place.
What I found, no, nor did I. I don't like the idea of everyone just jumping ship and thinking America's got something to offer that it probably has to them. But I don't. But when the stories went online and various sort of newspaper websites about Cheryl's sacking, if whatever we describe it as, from the American X Factor, some of the people who went online to put comments at the bottom of the stories, which of course is another thing that the internet allows people to do in a very sort of knee-jerk way.
And only the most malevolent misanthropic appear to do it.
That is more revealing about the world than any of these stories. You just think, please, what is the matter with you? The sort of the viciousness and the venom that comes out. You just think, what the worst that she's done is maybe made music that you don't like, and yet
exactly.
It's unbelievable.
Talk about as if she's a war criminal.
I know, it's extraordinary.
Well, viciousness and malevolence would never find its way into the Daily Star.
Absolutely
I know that. Mike Ward, thanks very much for joining us, friend.
Cheers, John.
Mike Ward, Daily Star's TV critic on the Simon Cowell story.